Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast that is all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor. Today's guest is one of the most successful coaches in the modern era, Coach Haack of the University of Georgia. Chris takes us from his early days at the AJGA all the way through his illustrious career at Georgia, which is 26 years and counting. He's not only one of the most successful college coaches in the country, he's also one of the funniest. He's a great storyteller. Listen carefully as Chris reveals the methods that have created a dynasty. It's a great listen. I hope you enjoy. All right, let's all give a big Better Than I Found It welcome to longtime Georgia Bulldog golf coach and a dear friend of mine, Coach Haack. Hey, Chris, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, and it's an honor to be with who I think is a legend, Mike McGraw. Love you.
Well, you know, we could both do the mutual admiration of society and call each other legends the whole time, but we're not going to do that. In fact, we're going to get into some pretty interesting stories, I think, in a minute. I think you are two parts. One of the most competitive coaches in college golf, but also one of the most fun-loving and easy to get along with coaches in college golf. So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy there, because usually if a guy's really competitive, and you are, Chris, you can't deny it.
Oh, yeah.
Really competitive, they don't have that other side to him where it's fun-loving, and you've always had that side to you too, which I really enjoyed. How do you balance the two?
You know, I don't know. I guess it's just my personality, and I think if I had the choice of one or the other, I'd rather be the fun-loving guy, but there is a competitive chip in me that just hates to lose. And, you know, I've often said when it came to winning championships that I didn't enjoy the ones I won as much as I hated the ones I lost. And those are the ones that still haunt me more than enjoying the ones that we did have an opportunity to win. So I don't know, there's just some competitive nature in me about that, but I would much rather be remembered for being a good person.
Well, and that I would the same, but I also know that when you talk about iconic athletes or great athletes or champion athletes, one of the things that comes out of those interviews a lot of times is how much more they hated losing than they enjoyed winning. So I think you're kind of mirroring what a lot of those great athletes think. They just didn't like losing. And because of that, it drove them. And so I know it drives you, right?
Well, and I think that's what it is you hate to lose. So you work a little harder, you do things maybe a little longer, and you put a little more emphasis on what it takes to win, because you do want to get into that winner's circle. And I think it's also what drives coaches, you know, because they want it for their kids. They want their players to, you know, enjoy that feeling of victory. And so you do it not just for yourself, you do it for the people around you too.
I think you've done it as well as anybody has the last 25 years. It's been pretty amazing. And so I'll just give a brief synopsis of your career, and this is going to way undervalue what has actually been accomplished there in Athens since you've arrived on campus. But so I think you've had 17 top 20 finishes at the NCAA and 9 top 10 finishes. 2 national championships in 99 and 2005, 2 runner-up in the national title in 2007 and 2011. I think currently you have 11 PGA Tour players with full status and 4 on the Korn Ferry. I think every single week when you tune in on the PGA Tour and you look at the leaderboard, almost always there's one Georgia Bulldog in the top 10, and sometimes multiple, but definitely 4 or 5 that have made the cut at least. So you've got like an incredible, you know, group playing currently on the PGA Tour. You've always been able to put out 2 PGA Tour players. You are a member of 3 Golf Hall of Fames, the Golf Coaches Association of America, the Georgia Golf Hall of Fame, and the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame. So I think people recognize in a good way, you know, what you've accomplished over the last 25 years as a coach. And that's what we know just on the outside. But the casual college golf fan doesn't realize it hasn't always been college golf. There was a 15-year or more period where you were with the American Junior Golf Association, the AJGA, and from its infancy in 1980 So I want you to talk about that because most people don't know the history you had there, which was quite extraordinary, actually.
Well, you go back to when I was in high school. So I got invited to play in 1978 in the inaugural Rolex Tournament of Champions, which is what it eventually became. But and I went down there thinking that I was a pretty decent, golfer, and I can remember we were playing Inverary Country Club, which is where they held the Jackie Gleason PGA Tour event. It was the first time I'd seen a lot of sand traps on a golf course, because I grew up on a golf course in Noonan, Georgia, that only had on the front side 2 bunkers and some on the back side. And so I navigated around there pretty good. I shot 73 thinking, man, I played really good, only to get in there. And I think 4 guys had shot 66, including like Andy Dillard and Willie Wood and Mark Brooks. And then there were about 5 or 6 67s and a bunch of 68s, a bunch of 69s. And here I thought I played really good and shot 73. And quickly realized that I was way behind the curve and how good I was. So, that part of it, kind of derailed a little bit of my golf ambitions. But went on, played a little college golf at West Georgia, but helped the AJJ in the summertime. Now you got to remember, for those who don't know, the Atlanta Junior Golf Association was started by a guy named Mike Bentley, and so I was helping Mike with the Atlanta Junior Golf Association stuff. He had then kind of created and spun off the American Junior Golf Association in 78. So we had a couple, one tournament in 78, a couple of tournaments in 79. And then in 1980, I think they had added a third event, which was the Future Legends out at Onion Creek in Austin, Texas. And so at that point, I was in college and I was helping him with the Atlanta Junior and these random few events that he was having with the American Junior. And then one day he talked to me about he wanted to turn over the Atlanta Junior Golf Association to somebody else and kind of run with the American Junior Golf Association and try to make it a go, and wanted me to go along with him and try to make that happen. And so I did that in 1981. He and I, along with a volunteer secretary, Kay Tway, which was Bob Tway's mom. Mm-hmm. We embarked on doing that. We had $180,000 budget for the first year. I was making $12,000 a year, and I thought I was rich. I just thought, man, I was killing it. And was with that organization till 1996. And I think when I left, I think we were probably about a $2.7 million deal, and we had 35 tournaments, and things had grown crazy. And of course, now you look back and it's really blossomed. I mean, it's huge. And but I think when I was with the AJGA, that's when I got a little bit of a taste of coaching, because in 1990 we started the Cannon Cup. Mm-hmm. Which was taking the best boys and girls from the East against the best boys and girls from the West. And I had seen a young man play golf at the Big I that year. So the very first year each coach had 2 coaches picked, so we could go off the board and take whoever we wanted. Stephen Hamlin, the executive director, was doing the East, I was doing the West. And I went off the board and picked a 13-year-old who was going to turn 14, who was not a member of the AJJ at the time. And I just thought there was something special about him. And it turned out I was right. It was Tiger Woods. And I put him on that team. And I can remember I was very nervous when we showed up at Lake Nona. And I wanted to see if he was really as good as I thought he was. I put him on a cart. We played 9 holes at Lake Nona. And I went, I'm going to be just fine. I think I found a nice little superstar here. And he played for me for 4 years on that team. And it was that atmosphere. It was kind of being with a team atmosphere and doing that kind of got me interested in coaching, so that when Dick Kopus retired at Georgia in the fall of 95, a few of the former players that had played in the AJJ that knew me kind of approached me about, my interest in that. And I was very fortunate that I talked Vince Dooley, the great Vince Dooley, into giving me the job. And here I am 26 years later, still here.
So if I'm reading this right, Chris, now correct me if I'm wrong. So it was Tiger Woods who inspired you to be a coach, and it was you that inspired Tiger to win 15 majors.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to have that as my byline, but no, he just happened to be one of the many that inspired me to get into coaching. But he certainly gave me the idea that I had a knack for seeing good young talent at a young age. So, because I can remember seeing a really young 12-year-old Harris English, a 12-year-old Russell Henley, those guys, and going, I'm going to keep an eye on these guys. So whenever I saw something really good and young at age 13, 14, I had a few of them that panned out pretty well.
Yeah, that's a little bit of an understatement there, Chris. They panned out quite nicely. But so you got the job. That's kind of how you came to college golf. And when you took over Georgia, it was pretty much not a very strong program at the time for a Division I Power 5 conference school. It wasn't that good. And obviously, just a few years later, you had them competing for a national championship. So I'm going to ask you, if we could take the 25 plus years you've been coaching there, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen before we talk about some specifics over that time? Like in college golf, what are the biggest changes?
Well, first of all, let me just say that about, taking over for Dick Kopus. They had a pretty storied program here. They just never had won the national championship. A lot of guys that had played at pretty high levels and had just kind of underachieved, in my opinion. But one of the first things I did, Mike, is my days at the AJGA and watching Mike Holder come out and how he recruited and the relentlessness in which he recruited. I latched myself right to his side, and he and I traveled together and roomed together on the road recruiting for probably my first 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And I wanted to see how he did it because I thought he was the best, and I still think he was the best. And I learned a lot from him just in how to evaluate talent, how to look at guys, how to recruit, how to watch, and how to be a good coach.
Well, if there was ever an odd couple,
yeah,
it would be that right there. I mean, truly, you guys were not very similar in very many ways.
And that was probably the reason we got along so great. And people would always say, I cannot believe you two guys are rooming together, but we really did have a lot of fun together. I think I loosened him up a little bit, and he actually taught me the serious side of things. So to this day, one of the greatest mentors I ever had. But going forward, golf has changed so much since then. I mean, having two coaches that can coach now where we didn't at the first. In fact, when I first got into coaching, my first hire as an assistant coach was a guy named Jim Douglas, and he was restricted to only, I think, making $11,000 a year. That was an NCAA rule, which was crazy. The 500 rule, which is still in play now, that changed things. And I'm not a great fan of that because I think it makes you dumb down your schedule sometimes. Gosh, heck, you probably know some of the rule changes. I forget them all. They seem to.
Well, rangefinders have become a part of college golf, which they weren't before. It used to be we could only have one coach recruiting on the road at any given time. So there's been a lot of changes. You've seen them all, I think.
Oh, yeah. And, now all of a sudden we're dealing with NIL stuff. The addition of that is going to really change. The transfer portal, I think, is going to transform a lot of recruiting things that we go through. So yeah, a lot of changes, and now we're at a 3-year permanent site for the championship, which is kind of new. And after that, we're going out to Lacoste for 3 or 5 years. I can't even remember what that is, but regionals changed. I mean, we used to do 3 regionals and 10 teams would come out. Now it's 6 regionals and 5 teams come out, which makes it a little bit of a little more stressful week. So yeah, a lot of things have changed in college golf, and of course the match play as part of our championship changing in 2009 was a big change. But it's been great for TV. I don't know that it's been great for you or I, but it's been great for theater for TV.
Well, yeah, all those changes that you noted have really changed the look of college golf. But a couple of the things that you didn't mention was the arms race that we have. It's just like everybody's built great facilities. You and I both know we're making more money than college coaches were back then, for sure.
Yeah.
And they don't limit what an assistant coach can make. So I think it's all been for the better, honestly. I think we're better off than we were, even if you don't agree with every change.
No doubt. And I think college golf is very healthy. I think the Golf Channel has done a great job in helping promote the college game. I know Brant Packer and those guys at the Golf Channel do whatever they can to try to identify guys on tour and affiliations with college, which does nothing but help promote our game a little bit. So yeah, I would say that college golf right now is probably as healthy as it's ever been.
Well, thank you for sort of that little history lesson of how things have changed. Appreciate that. You mentioned Jim Douglas, and that kind of gets to my next question. Jim's a longtime assistant coach. There have been others. Jordan Bird at Clemson. I was a longtime assistant coach at Oklahoma State. Donnie Darr is there currently. And Jim's been with you for a long, long time, with the exception of a little break that he took in the middle years there, somewhere in 05, 06, 07, somewhere in there. Tell me what Jim's best qualities are that he brings to the program, and what, just what you think his good qualities are that helped Georgia golf be better.
Well, Jim, first of all, he went to Georgia, so he was a Bulldog. He tried to walk on the team years ago. His dad was a golf professional over in Augusta at a place they called the Patch, Red Douglas. And what I just found out, sometimes Jim doesn't always tell me anything. I find these things out 25 years later. But his dad was really, really huge in promoting minority golf over in Augusta, and used to have all the great black players come there and play and put on events and so forth. So that's why it was always funny when we would take the team over to Augusta National. All the caddies over there knew little Jim Douglas. They'd always call him Little Red. Hey, Little Red. And, come to find out, it's because they all played over at the Patch. And so Jim came from a golfing father who taught him a lot about golf. And so he's just always been a really good assistant when it came to on-course stuff, on the range stuff, teaching these kids, the basic fundamentals of how to think your way around a golf course. I think he had aspirations of maybe getting a head job at some point, but he also loved Georgia. I mean, he's as big a Bulldog as you could find, and I think he just kind of loved being in this atmosphere, and I never really wanted to leave here if he didn't have to. And the couple of years, like you said, that he took off is when he got married and had a couple of kids and wanted to try to raise the kids. But when the opportunity arose, I brought him back, and he and I have been a fun odd couple for a long time.
Yeah, you guys are definitely a dynamic duo, and the longest running sort of assistant coach, head coach relationship in college golf that I know of. So Jim obviously brings a lot to the table. I want to ask a question. You've had all these tour players, and you've got a ton of them out there right now. And I've always been a proponent, and I tell young coaches, don't ever forget your players can teach you, because we tend to think we are the coach, we have all the answers. That's not the case. So what's the best thing, and you may have two or three, best thing a player has ever taught you about the game or about life or anything?
Oh gosh, I can remember probably one of the things that would stand out to me is, I think we as coaches, we always want to jump in there and help our players, right? We might see something happen on the golf course. It's a prototypical situation where you see a guy leave a putt way short because he thinks it's faster, and you want to tell that next guy that, hey, it's not nearly as fast, and then he knocks it 8 feet by, right? So we all have that we all have that desire to jump in there and help our players. But I also think a lot of times that becomes a detriment. So I can remember one year at the Jerry Pate tournament, Chris Kirk, who was a freshman, who was an AJJ All-American, was having a hard time making the lineup. And so I just took him.
But Chris, can I say something real quick?
Sure.
PGA Tour players would have had a hard time making that lineup. Okay, so don't diss on a poor freshman because he couldn't make your lineup. Okay.
Well, but he had a hard time making the lineup. He had a hard time finishing, and I took him not to play, not as an individual, just to observe and ride around in the cart and watch how college golf works. And again, that was back in the days when you could only have one coach. So at the coaches meeting, I asked the question. I said, "Hey, if Jim Douglas and I decide not to coach, can Chris Kirk be the on-course coach?" And they were all like, "Yeah, that'd be great." So Chris had an opportunity to stand on the par threes, to stand on that drivable par four, the 15th hole there at Old Overton. And what he brought away from that was, oh my God, I just can't believe how these guys don't listen. I'll tell them to hit it here and they hit it over here. And so it really kind of taught him that he worries way too much on the golf course because he saw these guys hit it 20 feet and get angry. And you know as well as I do, you can make that 20-footer just as easily. So I think it showed him that he made golf way too hard on himself. But it also showed us that, you know what, he's basically saying the same thing. Get out of their way and let them play. So I kind of learned a little bit of that from him at that point, just get out of the way, let them play. So that was a big one I learned. The other one I learned is that when you're dealing with, 10 or 12 kids on a team, inevitably you're always going to have some issues that come up that are personal issues among these kids or they're dealing with things back home with their families and so forth, whether it's a girlfriend breaking up or something going on, and that you're kind of a big brother or a father to all these kids, and that to never discount the influence on the advice that they seek from you, and just to help them navigate growing up and becoming men is a pretty big honor that they bestow upon you.
That's wonderful. I'm telling you, you didn't just teach us what a player can teach you there. You also taught us, how humility is a huge part. The player tells you, get out of my way. I want to run, let him run.
Yeah.
And I think coaches sometimes want the control so badly. We don't see that.
And this is where Jim Douglas and I have really helped each other over the years, because we'll be in a cart watching while other coaches like yourself, like to walk with players and do stuff. We sit back and kind of watch and observe so that we can see everybody play. And again, it's just the way we do it. But we both resist the temptation, because I'll inevitably go, you know what, I'm going to go out there and tell those guys that this hole's playing this certain way. And he'll go, Hacker, just stay right here. Or he might do the same thing. And I'll go, no, Douglas, just stay back. They'll figure it out.
That's good. That's really good advice. So because you've had all these tour players, you have had a front row seat to kind of what it looks like to get to the PGA Tour. Obviously, you didn't take 12 handicappers as a freshman get to the tour. You took good players already. But what are some of the common traits that you've seen, one or two common traits of all of these guys that have played and won on the PGA Tour that came through your program? Like, what's a common trait that makes a PGA Tour player?
Well, again, this is my guess. This isn't by no means am I absolutely right, but I get this question a lot. So the only thing I can think of is that, I probably do things a little different than most, in that we do a lot of qualifying. We're very competitive. I'm not real big on, hey, let's play for 3 and I'll pick 2. I've always been under the guys that, you know what, you tee it up for three or 4 rounds, and you take the guys who are playing the best at that given time, and they all kind of know going in, this is what we're playing for. I always look at it that, hey, none of these guys have any problems going to a U.S. amateur qualifier with 200 people playing for 4 spots, or going to the U.S. junior qualifier with, 120 people playing for 2 spots. Here we are, we're basically 10 guys playing for 5 spots. The odds are pretty good. So you got to tee it up, and you got to get there. You got to make sure you're there. So we've always kind of gone through a pretty harsh qualifying to get to each tournament. And so in 26 years, I've only had 3 guys that didn't miss tournaments because of that: Brian Harmon, Russell Henley, and Kevin Kisner. Everybody else had to watch that van leave the parking lot and put in a little extra work because they knew what was coming next, because they were going to have another opportunity, and they got to make it happen. And so, I've always kind of looked at it from that standpoint, and probably about every 5 to 6 to 7 years, when I've got all the guys back and we're talking to a lot of the former players, and I'll always say, hey, looking back, is there anything you would have liked to have done different, in the way that we did the qualifying? And every one of them says, no, absolutely. That is what we loved about it, is because we knew it was up to us to make it. And so I've always I sell it to recruits in this way. And that is that you're going to be playing for your spots the rest of your life, even if you make it to the tour. Because if you're not in the 125 for the FedEx Cup, you're trying to get there. And if you're in the 125, you're trying to get to that 75. And if you're in the 75, you're obviously trying to get to that tour championship in the top 30. And even if you're in the top 30, you're maybe trying to make that Ryder Cup team or that President's Cup team. So you're always having to play your way into your own successes or your own levels of success. So to have anybody just hand it to you probably isn't doing you much good. So you better earn it throughout the year. And if you do that, then you gain a little confidence. So I think that's the common thread.
Very good. Excellent. I think ultimately life is about competition when you get right down to it. And I'd rather, to get to any certain level of life or some sort of success or whatever, I'd rather know that I actually earned it than somebody just handed it to me. Sure. So I think you're doing the right thing there.
Well, Mike, and I go back to my AJJ days. In the early years of the AJJ, that Thanksgiving event, we used to allow 18-year-olds, even if they're in college, come back and play. And so the common thing I would always hear from all the guys who were freshmen who were back, and I'd say, hey, how you like college? It always seemed to be, well, it wasn't everything it was cracked up to be, because, I'm beating a couple of these guys, but the coaches always go with the older guy or the guy, the high scholarship or the more experienced player. And so I kind of went into it with, well, you know what, we're just going to make our guys play it. And, I don't care if you're a freshman. I don't care if you're on a big scholarship. It doesn't matter to me. Scores are scores. 68 beats 69 every time. And that's the way it's going to be the rest of your life. So you better get used to it.
Well said. All right. So you've told me basically what common traits are of players you've coached, what the best thing is that Chris Kirk taught you a lot as a player, but what's the best thing another opposing coach has taught you? Just like one thing you're going, oh my gosh. You mentioned Mike Kohler earlier, and you kind of gleaned information from him over time. But what do you think is the most significant one thing you learned from a coach?
That's a good question, because I've learned a lot from a lot of coaches, and I think that's part of what helps make you better. Is you take the good that you see with everybody, and I see a lot of great coaches out there, but I would have to say that probably from a recruiting standpoint, the relentless pursuit in recruiting that I've learned from you, from Mike, and from Bruce Hepler is just 3 of the best recruiters I ever put myself around, and just watch the way that you guys, like Energizer bunnies. I mean, I probably logged in more miles because of you guys, because I had to keep up with you. If I didn't, I was going to get behind. So probably learned that aspect from you 3 guys probably more than any.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but then why am I 1-6 against you? Explain that to me.
Well, I don't know that. That's an anomaly.
All right. Well, okay. You brought up recruiting. I'm glad you did, because that's where I was going next, because I have a recruiting story that I think needs to be told. I think my listeners need to know this, and I think all recruits out there need to hear this. Are you ready?
Okay.
So I'm minding my own business recruiting at the Texas versus Oklahoma All-Star match in the fall of 05. And actually it's fall of 06. And you and I decided to stay together there at Dornick Hills and Ardmore. So we're staying in the same hotel room, but you were going to leave early and I was staying for the last round. Would you like to describe actually what happened? Because I was the victim, and I'm going on record. I was the victim and you were the perpetrator. So I need people to hear this.
Well, first of all, people need to know one of the reasons that I gave you the nickname Iron Man is because you're relentless. You just never give up. You're just one guy who never runs out of energy. But I was leaving early. We were rooming together. I was going to run back to the hotel and pack up my stuff and leave. When I got back there, I thought, you know what? I need to leave my old buddy, Coach McGraw, just a couple of parting little nuggets from me. So I did the typical things. I put the shower head pointing right toward you, so when you turn that on, it hit you right in the face, and wet the towels so that when you went to get a dry towel, they were actually all wet. Put some shaving cream on the. We actually didn't have cell phones back then. We were still using rotary phones, so I put a little shaving cream on the phone in case you called, and would get a little in your ear. I think I turned the heat up to like 90.
It was 95 degrees in there. It was so hot.
Put a little toothpaste on the back side of the sink handle, so when you turn on the water, you get a little of that on there. Might unplug your cable TV. I don't know, but I booby trapped the room. I just remember hours later, I get a phone call from you going, okay, I need to know where the next booby trap's coming because I'm so afraid to try anything in this room.
I was so afraid to just move. You had me paralyzed at the time because it was like it one after another after another. And by the way, the next morning we went on the way to check out, 3 or 4 other things came about. So it was the gift that kept on giving.
Oh yeah, but you know what? Those were the things. Those are the stories I remember from our recruiting days, which made it fun and made it interesting, and being able to hang out with you and a lot of fun coaches is what a lot of the great stories are all about. And one of my other favorite stories with you is we were on the range watching, I think it was the Rolex Tournament of Champions out at the Blessings in Arkansas, when you had been doing about 4,000 sit-ups a day, and your abs were so strong that we decided to give everybody a demonstration. And you laid on the range as I stepped on your abs with my big 260 pounds. And you had no problem handling that.
Yeah, and actually, I just remember the dumbfounded look on those junior golfers as they were practicing after their round. They're looking, what are these two people doing over here?
Yeah.
We were just bored. We needed something to spice it up.
We were entertaining ourselves. Absolutely.
Yeah, we really were. But okay, so I think that kind of leads into, yes, we're competing hard against each other. Yes, we want to win. Yes, we want to get the best player, all of those things. But the truth is, we're still human beings and we still have fun and we still have a life outside of just the war that is recruiting. So I appreciate you giving me those memories.
No, I think those are the memories that I'll always have. Winning and losing is going to come and go, but all the great golf coaches and the funny stories surrounding all those great golf coaches that we were lucky to be around and travel around with and go to dinners with. Those are the memories that I'll cherish forever, because you and I, as we well know, and we were probably considered a couple of them as well, there have been some pretty good characters in our business that have entertained us quite nicely and made us laugh a lot.
I think so. And, you and I think still have some highway ahead of us. We've got more years. We could create more memories, but I'm going to talk about 2 memories right here. Both of them were actually a little painful for me, but we're going to talk about them anyway. One was the 1999 NCAA championship at Hazeltine. This is truly going to be your team that has the first chance to really win the NCAA championship. I mean, you had a couple of good teams before, but you're one of the favorites. And I'm an assistant coach for Mike Holder. We're at Hazeltine, a fantastic golf course. And for the record, if you miss the fairway on the 3rd hole, the par 5, with the tee shot, It didn't matter. You could not possibly, it was humanly impossible to get there in 3.
It was a par 6.
It was a par 6 if you missed the fairway, 100%.
And Mike, would you not agree? The hardest NCAA golf course we've ever played?
Hardest I've ever seen. I've never been so afraid of a golf course as we were that one. It was painful to be on. It was that hard.
In fact, I tell our guys about that place. We were the only team in the 30 teams in the NCAA that, even with non-counting scores, we were the only team that didn't have a score in the 80s.
That's unbelievable because we counted a score in the 80s that week. And so if I have some memories of that week, one, you just described it, really hard golf course. Number 2, the 16th hole was actually drivable, but we played it as a layup hole. And I know we counted a triple and a quad that week and maybe 2 doubles over the 4 rounds. You beat us on that hole. That was the hole. And I think Mike Holder and I talked about it. And the next year at Grand National, the 16th hole was a drivable par 4. And I think that's where we won the championship the next year because we played that hole beautifully. But so I want you to talk about that 16th hole because you guys discovered it in the practice round. This is not a layup hole. This is bomb it up there. And why did you decide that?
Well, the 16th hole at Hazeltine, it's the second shot that kind of goes into a peninsula. And so you miss it left, right, or long, you're in the water. And so we figured out everybody was hitting irons or a hybrid off the tee and leaving yourself a 4-iron or a 3-iron into that hole. And we just kind of figured it out in the practice round. There was one of the reasons that guys did that is because of the creek that ran up the left side of the hole. And what we figured out was that if we took driver and went ahead and just ripped it all the way up there, even if you pulled it a little bit and you knocked it into the hazard or into the creek, drop it out, wedge it on, give yourself a par putt. And if you walk off a bogey, no big deal. You're not going to be making any big numbers. And if you don't hit it in the creek, you got a great chance of making par birdie. And so we just, we attacked that hole. And if you remember, Ping had that really good driver that year. I can't remember the model, but
ISI.
And all 5 of my guys were hitting that driver, and they were bombing it anyway. And so we just played that hole in that capacity. And we had a couple of guys that pulled it in the creek, and again, they would walk off with the worst case scenario bogey, where everybody else that was laying it back were leaving. If they were in the rough, they were pulling it or pushing it and hitting it in the water and making doubles and sometimes triples. So we just kind of took what we thought the golf course gave us. And I will never forget Mike Holder standing at the scoreboard with me on that 4th round going, how in the world did you guys play that hole? Because he saw it, I guess, maybe in the last round. Is that when we played with y'all finally in the final round?
Yes.
And he saw everybody hitting driver. They're going, what did y'all do that all week? And went, yeah. And he told me, he said, well, he certainly played it the wrong way, but we just kind of got lucky and figured that out before everybody else did.
Well, good job. And it actually helped us win the next year. Even though we had to go to a playoff to do it, we played that 16th hole very aggressively. We didn't lay up unless there was a slight breeze into you. But okay, so I have that memory. I have another memory of Chris Haack, and only one coach could coach in those days. Actually coach, give advice. And I could barely find you that final round. You were in the trees all the time. Talk about that.
Well, yeah. So you can only have one coach. So Jim Douglas was the designated coach, and he would work the par 3s, maybe some of the par 5s and so forth. But I was regulated to just being a spectator. Well, there were 2 things you could find out about me pretty quick. I was pretty superstitious. So in the mornings we would start out, and if it was chilly, I could have on a pullover and a rain suit. And if for some reason we were playing pretty good, I wouldn't shed it. I would keep it on. And I'll never forget Mark Northey coming by me on the 10th hole or the 11th hole. And he said, Coach, we must be playing okay. And I said, yeah, we're playing all right. And I said, why? He said that? He goes, because it's so hot out here and you still have your full rain suit on. So that was always kind of a giveaway that we were playing pretty good. But also, if I was standing, so, I'm superstitious. So if I was standing somewhere and leaning against a tree and we made a birdie, I would stay right there and keep leaning against that tree. So I always kind of found myself just kind of trying to stay out of all their ways. And I didn't want them worrying about what I was doing and so forth. I just wanted them to play golf and not worry about me. So I'd kind of float around and blend in with the trees or the woods or the crowd. So
You did a great job, obviously, that year, but you did get some help from a young player named Ryuji Amada. He only one putted the first 7 holes that final round, and the 7th hole was about an 80-footer over 3 mounds. Were you actually at watching that putt or not? Because I remember it like it was yesterday.
I was standing up over the hill by the behind the 7th green, watching that, and it was the longest putt. And I mean, it looked like it was going to take forever to get there because the greens were so good and so fast. And when he rolled that in, I mean, obviously that was huge momentum for us. But Ryuji, I kind of call Ryuji our Herschel. He kind of loaded us up on his back and took us to victory that day with what arguably might be one of the greatest rounds of college golf I've ever seen. And I know Coach Holder told me it was one of the best rounds of golf he had ever seen in college golf, because he walked every hole that day because he had Charlie Howell in the group. And of course, Luke Donald, who won the NCAAs, was in that group. So those 3 guys played, and Ryuji played it safe on the 18th hole and took a bogey because he knew we were nursing a lead and didn't want to do anything crazy. But bogeyed that last hole to shoot 67, which tied Payne Stewart's competitive course record on that day. So it was by far one of the best rounds of golf we could have ever had, and it literally won the championship for us.
When you think about it and you look back on your career, it's not over. You got a lot left, but I mean, that has to have some pretty special in your memories, a real special meaning. It was your first title, and it kind of validated you and your program on a national level. That I remember feeling the same way when we won in 2006 at Oklahoma State. So talk about that, and then we'll move on to the next thing.
No, it was an incredible feeling because, again, you put in all that hard work, you put in all the miles recruiting and walking around and preparation. And one thing I've come to find out over 26 years is that only one team's going to win. No matter how hard everybody works, there's only one team's going to win. So when you do get to that place where you're able to hoist that championship, those become pretty special because you know how rare they are. And that will always be a very special memory for me. Absolutely.
That was a great victory that day. And Oklahoma State, we finished runner-up, about 3 shots behind. Had a great team. We had a great season, so I was happy with that. Just kind of disappointed we didn't win the overall title. I do remember Edward Lohr in our post-tournament meal ate a 47-ounce steak, and he ate it basically rare, just as rare as it could be. And I just thought, I've never seen anything like that in my life, and I was a pretty good eater.
Yeah, you're still a good eater.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Fast forward 10 years to the 2009 NCAA championship at Inverness, the first time the national championship was held at match play, the way we see it today. And I look back, and that was a pretty pivotal moment in the history of college golf, because 2 of the best players, Ricky Fowler and Brian Harmon, played an epic match in the first round of match play. They were the deciding match in our match against each other. I was the coach at Oklahoma State at the time, and you were obviously at Georgia. But I think once the NCAA and the Golf Channel saw that match, they realized match play is this is definitely where we're going.
Well, it's kind of interesting. A lot of little things that happen there that probably people don't know about. We obviously seeded it after how we played, and because of a incorrect scorecard that Hudson Swafford signed, we had to take a stroke higher, which knocked us, instead of being in the 7th spot, it put us in the 8th spot, which put us against you guys. And as you all know, we were 1 and 2 all year long going into that NCAA. And had we signed the correct scorecard, we might have been on opposite sides of the brackets and ended up meeting in the finals. But the fact that we had to meet in the very first match, I still call that my 3rd national championship, because that was by far probably one of the greatest matches ever. But you think about that, there were, out of those 10 guys, 8 guys played the tour pretty regularly and just incredible. But that match with Brian Harman and Ricky Fowler was unbelievable coming down the stretch. And Brian Harman literally had to birdie the final 3 holes to win 1 up. And it kind of set off what was now going to be our new format for the NCAAs.
Well, the game is a game of inches. You've heard it a million times, but Brian's wedge on the last hole was about 2 inches from going over the green into a collection area, but it hung on. He had about a 4-footer, and Ricky just came up short and wasn't able to make the putt. Just part of the game. I know we were crushed. Ricky was crushed, but it was an epic match. No other way of looking at it. It was an amazing match.
Well, and you know what? It was after that match. I mean, again, we both had really, really good years. I mean, all year long we were 1 and 2, and I just remember being in going into the locker room, being in there, because we had to then turn around and play again.
Yep.
Which was too bad, because I mean the emotions were so high. I know your guys, there were some tears shed in that locker room, and that's when you start realizing how much it means to these kids and how much effort they put into all this kind of stuff. And we literally had to turn around and play again an hour later, and we weren't mentally prepared to play. We were still walking down the fairways of the first hole talking about the last match. And but boy, wow, what a great match it was.
It was excellent. And I think it's the first in a series of really epic matches that have defined the national championship over the last 12, 13 years. It's been great at match play. I've enjoyed watching it, enjoyed being there. But anyway, so all right, so let's talk about a couple.
Unfortunately, you've been on the side of having some really great teams. I'm going to turn this interview on you, and I mean, you literally had some awesome golf teams that narrowly got defeated in that match play portion. I mean, what was your harshest loss in all that?
Well, I think both 2009, because I felt like we were on the top of the stroke play leaderboard the last 13 rounds of the year, including the 3 rounds at Nationals. So I knew we had a good team there. And Ricky, I also knew was going to turn pro after the Walker Cup that year, so I wouldn't have him anymore, and he wanted to win really bad. So that one hurt. But the next year probably hurt more, because I feel like at Chattanooga, we definitely had the best team there as well, and we were playing great, and we won the stroke play there as well. And I just felt like, okay, we didn't get it done last year. We got beat by a great Georgia team in the first round. Now, at Chattanooga, we had to play Stanford, the number 2 ranked team, in the first round. We were able to beat them, beat Oregon, and then we played Augusta State in the final. And I think it hurt really bad, because I felt like we had the team that should have won that day. So that's probably, I don't regret anything, but that's probably the one that still stings the most.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guarantee you those sting more than that one in 2006 that you did win.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like I said, I hate losing it just like you do, Chris.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to do a speed round here at the end, but it's a little different speed round than I've done with all these other people. You're a little different guy. You know that, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked a lot of coaches and players. And that is, if you had one piece of advice for a 14-year-old who's a competitive golfer, but he wants to play college golf and beyond, he wants to play the PGA Tour, your best piece of advice, if you gave this to him, you've given him the best you could give him to put him on that path. What is that?
I would probably say, don't get too caught up in your golf swing, but learn how to play, learn how to go out and hit shots. Go play 3 club rounds, play play multiple shots, learn how to hit it, turning it left to right, learn how to hit shots, learn how to bump, really go learn how to play. I unfortunately feel like too many kids get caught up in their golf swings and they forget that it's really about getting the ball in the hole. So I would say that, along with being a little more aggressive too with the equipment that we have these days. You can hit it at the flag a little bit more than maybe we could back in our day. So be a little bit more aggressive. Try to make birdies. Play golf courses at a length that allows you to make a lot of birdies and learn how to shoot 5 and 6 and 7 under, and get used to doing that. That would be my biggest piece of advice to give kids.
Excellent advice. I really like the part about not getting too tied up in your golf swing. It's crazy to see young players who are great and then they become obsessed with the golf swing. Yeah. And then they forget their obsession was enjoying the game and competing. They forget that part and they spend too much time on the golf swing. Good advice.
What would be ideal is if you could somehow take a kid out and let him watch Lee Trevino with Jim Furyk and I don't know, Miller Barber, somebody else. Just go watch these guys, or Johnny Miller, any of them, because what they do is they play golf. Mm-hmm. And that's what you ideally want them to do.
That's great advice. Okay, you're going to have a short speed round, 3 questions. Okay. The first 2 are common ones I've asked everybody, and the third one is unique to you.
Okay.
Number 1, Shawshank Redemption or Remember the Titans?
Remember the Titans.
Thank you. Chick-fil-A or Chipotle as a go-to at a tournament?
Oh, Chick-fil-A.
Attaboy. And the final question. If you had a choice to live and immerse yourself into one of these 2 things, which would it be? The 1980 Georgia Bulldogs national championship team with Buck Bellew and Herschel Walker and that crew, or 2021 with the current crew? Which one and why?
Gosh, I've lived them both. Oh man, I tell you, right now, I guess because we're fresh off of it and it'd been 40 years, and it was such a Cinderella story with Stetson Bennett, and I've been living it up here for 26 years. I'd probably have to say this one. But boy, 1980 sure was fun.
That was pretty good. Okay, I agree with that. And my assistant, Mikkel, predicted you would say this year for sure.
Yeah.
And I agree with it, and I can't argue with it because you're the one that lived through them both. But I will tell you this: you've got one very glaring hole in your intelligence. Okay, and I'm gonna explain that one right now. You've told me in the past you think Herschel Walker was the greatest college running back in history, and I have contended forever that it's Barry Sanders. I think you're wrong. You tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, I'm going to tell you the same thing I've told you before, and that is Herschel Walker, as a freshman, basically lifted Georgia up and took them to the national championship. Now, what some people don't realize is that in that Sugar Bowl game against Notre Dame, which had a great team, I don't think they had allowed 100 yards rushing to anybody that year. Herschel Walker, on I think it was his second play from scrimmage, dislocated his shoulder. He came out of the game. They couldn't figure out what was going on with his shoulder. He said he couldn't lift his arm up. They finally took his shoulder pads off, and his arm had dislocated under his shoulder blade. And they popped it back in, and they literally asked him to go in there against this defense and help them win this ball game. So Buck Bellew, the quarterback, only threw the ball 9 times, completing 2 passes. Okay. But Notre Dame knew Herschel Walker was going to get that ball over and over and over and over and over. And he led them to 2 touchdowns and a win over Notre Dame. and thus winning the national championship. Now, Barry Sanders was a great running back, but he didn't lead. If he was that great, why didn't they win any national championships?
Okay.
The next year, Herschel took them basically to the national championship game against Penn State. And the year after that, they had another chance to win the national championship against Pittsburgh. But I don't remember Barry Sanders being in any of those games. He got a lot of garbage yards at the end of games.
Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to, first of all.
No, he was a great running back.
He didn't have the same linemen. He didn't have the same people around him that Herschel Walker did. And second of all, they had him, he would get 220 yards in the first half. He didn't play garbage yards because he never played the third and fourth quarter. So,
well, I will tell you this. There were a couple of instances which I would bring this topic up. And I remember one time asking Coach Jim Donnan, who was under Barry Switzer over there at Oklahoma. And they were playing against the Cowboys. And I can remember him telling me a story that Thurman Thomas looked like he was getting tired or limping or something. And that they said, don't hurt him. The guy behind him is better, which would have been Barry. Yeah, so they didn't want to hurt Thurman Thomas, who was a great obviously a great running back. And then the other one was, I think was it R.C. Slocum? Was he the one down at Texas?
Yeah.
And he and I got talking at Texas A&M one time, and I posed the question to him. I said, because he played against Herschel his freshman year, and I think we beat him like 45-0. And I asked him that question, and he told me Barry Sanders. Well, that was because he had to face him 4 times, over a career. He only had to face Herschel once.
And we both agree they were 2 incredible running backs.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think anybody would be crazy to say I'll take either one of them and I'll be just fine.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, Chris, thank you so much for spending an hour with me today. You're truly one of my good friends in college coaching, and I hope you and I get to do this another 10 or more years.
I absolutely do too, and I look forward to seeing you out on the road. And yes, you are one of my dearest and closest friends in college, and I'll love you forever.